We continue to meet the candidates running for office in this general election coming up. Senator Bryan Townsend is next. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. We have a big election coming up, and one of the gentlemen running for Congress is Senator Bryan Townsend from the 11th District. He is a Democrat. 11th District's mostly Newark?
South Newark and a little bit of Northern Bear.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Since we talked to you once before, and at the time there was two Bryans running. Brian Short is now out. Now it's Lisa Blunt Rochester, former Labor Secretary, and Sean Barney is still in, who worked in the governor's office, I think was doing policy, also ran for treasurer. How's the race going? Where do you see yourself?
It's going very, very well. Every measure that we have, we're out in front. We're hearing great feedback from the grassroots. We have many events up and down the state talking about policy, talking about the future of our country and our state. And then from a fundraising perspective, we're doing extremely well. We've raised the most money for the primary, and so much of it's coming from Delawareans, and especially $100 or less per contribution. So we are doing it the way that—
Why is that important?
I think it's important because then you're accountable to the people that you're representing. I think right now the challenges in our country, people want to see a grassroots approach. They want to see that you're listening to the people, and that's reflected in our fundraising. And
we were just talking a moment ago, you were saying that your opponents are getting most of their money from out of state.
Yes, and from large contributions driven by family. If you look at the base of support, we have the biggest base. The majority is from Delaware. We're not receiving large sums of money from super PACs, which is what both of our main opponents have talked about. They'll be doing over the course of the campaign, and it's tough. It's tough to fight against that. But we're off to a great start.
And is that something you're going to run on? Are you bringing that up as part of your campaign, that I'm getting my money from small contracts? Because Bernie Sanders does it. I know people have done it in the past.
We're definitely talking about it. We're going to keep talking about the things that are leading us to be able to do that. We're just focusing on the issues that are really important to Delawareans, especially at this critical time in our national democracy. Why
is the primary split up for local and national?
In Delaware?
Yes.
It happened some time ago. There's actually a bill that's going to be introduced.
I saw that.
Well, two bills. One is going to, for 2018 primary, pull it back a little bit earlier, just 1 week earlier in September because of Rosh Hashanah. But there's another bill that's being circulated that would bring all the statewide elections back into April in the presidential year with the presidential primary.
Which would save money, right?
It would save apparently $1 million for the state overall. I think the bill, and I haven't taken a look at it, I think the bill would keep state legislative races for primaries in September. I think the reason for that is our legislative session ends June 30th. And so it's a part-time legislature. You're supposed to be focused January to June on doing the legislative tasks. And so if you had a primary in the middle of that already truncated session, it would just throw more of it into disarray. So I think the idea is finish June 30th, have the summer where a lot of people aren't even focused in on politics, and then have it as early in September as possible. I think that's the origins of Delaware's system.
It seems like it's split because the Democratic Party wants more, or not, and the Republican Party, the parties want more control over their state elections and don't want the influence from outsiders in a national election.
I hadn't heard that. I hadn't thought of it that way. As a state senator the past 4 years, I kind of had always assumed that if you were to have to campaign in the middle of an already shortened legislative session, that would dominate your day as opposed to focusing on legislation and policies. So that's kind of where I had thought it was coming from. But there are downsides to it. It's very late in the calendar. Right. There's no doubt about that. It only leaves 8 weeks in between the primary and the general election. And if you're in a tough general election race, that is a very, that's an uphill climb, especially if your opponent didn't have a primary. So there are downsides to it too, but if it doesn't interfere with the legislative session, then I'm certainly all for it. There are bills now, to your question, there are bills now that are taking a look at changing that part of the calendar.
There's also a bill that's in the legislature, I think it came out of the Attorney General's office, about bullying. And we had the tragic case at Howard High School here in Wilmington of Amy Joyner Francis, who died after being beaten in a girl's bathroom where she should have been safe. Have you been able to take a chance to take a look at the bill? Is it doing enough to keep people safe in the high schools?
Well, I think that the bill is still pending. It passed the Senate, it's on to the House, and there have been feedback from stakeholders that giving the bill at the heart gives more flexibility to not just say, let's force kids force kids out of school, that if they misbehave, then they need to be out of school. We've seen time and again how if there are kids who are misbehaving and we don't keep them in school in some sort of setting, then they're not really going to be able to advance. And so it's trying to get at a more flexible system, very similar to some of the broader criminal justice reforms that we've championed the past few years to make the system work better. We have heard from individuals the past few days in particular have started sending emails that they want to engage in a bit of a dialogue about whether or not the flexibility is going to go too far in terms of not punishing kids for misbehavior. And I recall one email in particular, I think it was yesterday actually, I just got it, that someone said, well, how about parental involvement in all this process? Which I think in general, parental involvement in our schools is something that we have not focused on enough over the years.
This stuff all plays out on social media. And this one certainly did. This one, there was threats and there was a back and forth. And it seems to me, and that's all public. And the schools don't seem to be aware that that's happening, that there should be somebody that's monitoring social media, because that's where many of the warning signs come from.
We definitely have some level of monitoring that does happen. I can recall times when schools have been out ahead of certain threats in the school that they saw online. Whether or not different schools or different districts have someone dedicated to doing it versus someone who's immediately receptive and responsive when tips come in or updates come in is a different question. But there's definitely some monitoring that's going on, because I know that schools have been out ahead of being prepared to respond to something like a bomb threat or some kind of talk of a rally or a riot. And there's just no doubt that I think social media right now, kids are, social media can be such a powerful and important tool for connecting people across the globe, for sharing ideas, for people feeling they have a voice. But again, if it's not directed in the right way, and if it's not guided in the right way, whether it's through parental involvement, whether it's through schools, you can have very negative outcomes, and you can have sort of a forest fire start online. And we've seen that happen, and it's very, very sad. Amy's lost to her friends and family and the entire community. It's extremely tragic.
And I do think there's some legislative remedies, so I hope you all find it soon, because the calls, I do a radio show here, the calls we're getting from parents and teachers that are frustrated. They say these fights break out all the time, and it was just a matter of time.
We never had that, and I just think it leads to a different culture that young people have nowadays. The immediacy of the accessibility to information, the things they're learning at such a young age. I do think we have to do something, not just about the bullying aspects, but the drivers of the behavior, the drivers of students' safety and students' engagement with learning in the schools. We've really got to focus on that. And the past bunch of years, there's a lot of focus has been on the testing of students' test scores. Very important to make sure students are prepared, to make sure that educators are effective in helping teach students, but there's so many of these other drivers.
They're not going to learn if they don't feel safe. But Senator, thank you so much. We went way over in our time, but it was fascinating, and we didn't even get to half the things I wanted to talk to you about. So please come back. Senator Bryan Townsend from the 11th District. He's also a Democratic candidate for Congress. When we come back, we talked about it a moment ago, the juvenile justice system in Delaware. We'll talk about possible reforms when Delaware Way continues.